Hello, my friend. Welcome to this episode of A Call to Leadership. I'm Dr. Nate Salah, your host, and I have a very special treat for you on this episode as we unpack this insanity we have with our tech, constantly connected with it, sometimes difficult to let it go. I don't know about you, but I found myself just scrolling for hours and wasted time. Granted, we could be doing this as a break or release. However, it can become life consuming. And we sometimes need a pause, a break, a way to just have a Sabbath, a day of rest from our tech. Well, I've invited Erick Vargas, who has addressed this very issue with his own app, Sabbath Space. Can't wait for you to listen in as we emphasize the importance of maintaining balance, harmony between our digital and real life interactions. This concept of Sabbath as a day of rest and reflection is nothing new, and the need to disconnect from work, from technology, to rejuvenate, to find more purpose in life, get out, spend time with those we love, relationships, do other things. Can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Salah, and this is A Call to Leadership. Erick, thanks for being on the program.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, man. So you've got a really interesting journey of business, and that it applies to our listener, and that you've created a tech app that's anti-tech. What's up with that?
Yeah, so it's funny. So like full time, I run a software company. It's a CRM, if you ever heard of that, like
Mhm.
Salesforce or HubSpot. It's like a business to business software. And so I'm kind of entrenched in the tech world, and I get to see kind of behind the scenes what big tech does to keep us on our devices, all the time, right? And maybe we didn't ask to be on our phones 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, but that's kind of where we're at, right? And the reason why I built Sabbath Space to begin with is like I just had a son. He's 2 years old now, but I checked my screen time, and I spent 6.5 hours that day on my phone,
Wow.
and I'm like, wow, that is crazy. And so I started to do some of the math. If you spend 6 hours a day on your phone, that's like 42 hours a week. That's a full-time job, right? That's 100 days a year. A third of your year you're on your phone. It's insane. And then throughout your whole life, you're losing a decade, 12 years more on your phone. And we're missing out on life, right? And I didn't want to miss those early moments with my son, right? And so that's why, no one like I no one intends to be on their phone all the time, but big tech has really made um our phones, these apps, as addictive as possible. They've invested billions and billions of dollars and thousands of hours of time, millions of hours of time into making sure we're glued to our screens. And so this is kind of my way to like put some boundaries around that, right?
Man, that hits so close to home. Like for me, for our listener, I don't think very many people in our space, whether they be entrepreneurs, professionals, and people of faith especially, are going to argue with, man, we need a Sabbath from our tech. It's so true. I
Yeah.
was just talking to my spouse about this, and we were talking about it, and I was like, you know what? We need to have just a day where all the tech, everything that is digital is gone.
Yeah.
And we can
Yeah.
actually communicate and spend time as a family. And like, what was life like? What was life like before all this tech? I remember.
I remember too.
Yeah, man. It's like you think about it. It's like people actually saw each other in person. We
Yeah.
communicated more. We got out and did more. And it's so easy to get in that zap. I was just talking to a client the other day about
like laying in bed for 2 to 3 hours just with the thumb
Mhm.
scroll, right? And
They
it's
call
like,
it
wow,
doom scrolling. That's
is
what
that
they
what it's
call it.
called?
Doom scrolling, right?
So it hits all of us. I mean, this
Oh
is an
yeah.
epidemic. This is literally an epidemic, and you're right. It's so addictive. It speaks to, the algorithm
Hmm.
speaks to everything that you
Yeah.
want and need. Of course, they're listening, and it's kind of like a cliche
Yeah.
joke now that as soon as you say something, talk about. I was
Yep.
for our great summit, our ministry arm. We were talking about the opportunity to really speak to different addiction.
Yeah.
So guess what happens on my feed now? It's like, hey, are you struggling with X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness. Well, no, but you are listening, and I'm glad that you're sharing that, right? In
Yeah.
some ways, it's a good thing, but in some ways, as you said, it can
Mhm.
be completely destructive.
Yeah, it's just gone too far, right? Like phones are a super useful tool, but now rather than us being in charge of our phones, our phones are in charge of us, right? And so that's what Sabbath Space is really is about, is actually getting you off. It's an app to get you off your phone, which is kind of funny. It's ironic, right? Um, but
I
try
mean,
to
that's
take
a good way to
somebody's
do
phone
it, though,
away,
right?
right?
It's like
Yeah,
you gotta like
yeah.
go, you're infiltrating the space.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And so Sabbath Space, there's a couple of, like screen time apps out there. But Sabbath Space actually has a little unique twist. And it's a little different because I don't know if you've used this feature on your phone, but there's a screen time feature that will pop up whenever you've used an app too much. And you can set that up in your settings actually, and that's free to do. It's super easy. However, my wife tried to do that. And after a while, the pop up just says one more time, 15 more minutes, or 1 hour.
I've seen
And
that. Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about? Okay.
Yep.
So bypasses it all the time, right? Like it's not even, it's just an extra click to get to the app, right? And so I'm like, why do you even have that if you're just gonna bypass it every time, right? And but like on the other hand, try to take somebody's phone away. Impossible, right? So Sabbath Space is actually in the middle. And
Mhm.
what it is actually, it comes with a device. It comes with a keychain or a table stand. I have it right here, for your desk or for your table side, like bedside, table stand. And I'm actually, so just in our, like 7 minutes here today, I've gotten like 45 notifications on my phone. So I'm actually going to activate it right now.
Hold on. 45 notifications. Oh man.
Yeah. I like seriously, I got so many notifications and it's just distracting me and I want to be in this conversation, right?
Right.
And so what you do actually is pretty cool. You just activate the app and then you tap on this device and now I don't get any of those notifications or access to the applications unless I rescan the device.
Mm.
So it's an extra layer of friction so
Yeah.
that I just don't bypass it, right?
Yeah.
So at our house, we have that device in three places. At the dinner table, we have it in my room, in our room. Me and my wife, we have one on each side of our nightstands, and then at the front of the door, right? Because let's say I get home from work, and I want to, play with my kid, I can scan my phone, and I'm probably not going to walk across the house just to get on Instagram. You know what I mean? uh I'm actually too lazy to do that, so it actually, but what it does, it takes away the um like the time that my phone buzzed or the time that I just picked it up off of default, right? Because that's what it's become. It's just instinctual, like mindless time on our phone, and that's what Sabbath Space does. It gives us that time back.
Mm. Well, it's you're hitting all the hot buttons, and there's so much to this because one of the things that I've found, even getting drawn into conversations. Now, I've resisted the urge. I don't know about you, Eric. I've resisted the urge over the last few years to not engage in social conversations, especially when they're contentious, because they just go down rabbit holes, and then you're involved for hours, and then you're back and
Yeah.
forth, and you're usually having conversations or arguing with someone who perhaps is the best way to have that debate is possibly in person and not over a
100%.
virtual text message in front of a million people, right? And so then your day's ruined and you're like, oh my goodness. And then it's like, you know what? How about we find a way to distance ourselves just a little bit from that? And this is what you're talking about. And I think it's just good for the soul
100%.
to have the kind of discipline to just step away from the social, at least
Yeah.
the digital social interaction, and perhaps have a different kind of interaction. It just
Yeah.
reminds me of Jesus. And I love to get to your journey through seminary too,
Yeah.
somewhat on this conversation, and I'm sure it's informed some of your development of this mission
Yeah.
to help people to protect their Sabbath space. Uh, it reminds me of when he would retreat and go to the other side of the lake, or he would take
Mm.
time to rest. He could
Yeah.
have like had more social interaction, but he knew that he had to be
Yeah.
in unity with the Father. He needed to have downtime that
Yeah.
was away and calmed his mind so that
Yeah.
he could focus and remind himself and be in unity with what his purpose was. And I think we can,
Yeah.
man, we these distractions become obstacles, and they
Right.
create dissonance, and they create all kinds of confusion on, hey, what's my highest priority? What is it
Mm.
that I should be doing? And by the way, you mentioned, children, they're watching.
100%.
They're watching to see, hey, what is your life like?
Yeah.
What are your interactions? How do you navigate and use the one gift that you cannot replicate? You can't make any more
Yeah.
time.
Where do you spend your attention?
100%. This is it. And I know it sounds heavy, but it's true. It's
It's
like, man,
true.
this is it. You don't want to get to the end of the journey of life and say, oh my goodness, I invested 42 hours a week, and then multiply that by the number of years you've got left
Yeah.
in in areas of my life that were not going to have the impact that
Yeah.
were my very best.
And think about what you're missing when you do that, right? So like, I get to play trains with my 2-year-old, right? Like, and I get to see him build these tracks and like go like, the Thomas the Train classic kind of toys, right? Instead of, whatever, fire is going on or whatever is going on in the whole world, right? Like we're not supposed to know all these catastrophes and tragedies that are going on, the other side. We're just not emotionally built for that, right? And so that's part of the anxiety that we're taking in, right? And hopefully this kind of breaks the phone addiction that we're all kind of have succumbed to.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's an important point to talk
Mm.
about what we take in. And you mentioned emotionally built for or absorbing all these tragedies. I quit watching the news years ago, and I'll flip it on
Mm.
from time to time. It's because it's mostly tragedies, and it's not that we should not be aware, we should not know how to
No.
pray, we shouldn't be. However,
Yeah.
it's 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 really taking our thoughts captive and what we
Yeah.
surround ourselves with
Yeah.
to be whole,
Yes.
to be full. In fact, I remember years ago, my mom would years ago when CNN was a new the whole cable news network thing, and they were the very first 24-hour
Right.
news station. It was revolutionary at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like, oh, this is awesome, right? Well, my mom would watch it 24/7, and
Right.
she got so depressed and
Mm-hmm.
anxious. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, Mom, you got to turn it off.
Right.
You got to turn it off. It is just destroying your mental, your emotional
Yeah.
well-being. And sometimes people can't, Eric. Sometimes it's this cycle,
It's
and
addictive.
and it's truly an addiction. So like for that person, what do we say? And they say, well, my whole life is wrapped around in this social context, especially many generations, but I say even the younger generation, especially post COVID. And it's like, hey, my
Yeah.
all my social interaction is here on this device.
Right.
What do you say to that?
That um we've lost the ability to really savor real life, right? We're exchanging friend requests to actually going out and having lunch with a friend, right? Look like we're losing that, right? We've lost like, hearts and likes, and we exchange it for like, when was the last time you said an encouraging word to somebody's face, right? Instead of a comment, right? And you know, it's not that one is bad, it's just it's a cheap substitute, right? And then you lose the soul connection that we're built for, right? And we're not tasting and seeing God's creation, right? And we're just missing out, right? Like I remember the first time that I saw the Grand Canyon. And I'm a pretty even keel guy, but this is one of my wife's favorite memories because we've all seen the Grand Canyon, pictures of it, but I was driving and we turned the corner and I saw the Grand Canyon for the first time, and I was just like, wow. And I was just like amazed because I never seen anything like it before in real life. And the pictures don't compare, once
No.
you see it in life. When you see, the colors and the beauty of God's creation, you gotta experience it.
Yeah, even VR goggles. They
Yeah,
still don't do
yeah,
it. It may
yeah.
you may think it's closer, but there's
It's
nothing
closer.
like the full experience, full immersion.
Yeah,
And that's the thing with human interaction.
yeah. I heard somebody say this is that like, the average time lunch or dinner, it takes only like 7 to 10 minutes to eat your food. And then he said, we're eating, but we're not having meals anymore.
Mm. Mm.
Right. And back in the day, we used to spend, an hour or two around the table, right? And rather than that, everything's fast food, everything. And it's, we're losing that, so DoorDash or instead of home cooked meals, right? It's just the way society's going, and there's value there for sure. But, I don't want to be consumed by it, right?
Right. And at what cost? Right. At what
Yeah.
cost? The
Yeah.
cost of the memories, the relationships. In fact, I just
Right.
got speaking of that, I just got a short sent to me electronically by a friend about like all the things that they wish they would have done. Wish they would have
Yeah.
spent more time with loved ones, wish they would have went on that trip, wish they would have had the longer meal, wished,
Yeah.
all these things. And almost all the wishes were around human interaction. They
Hmm.
were
Hmm.
around 3D, like real people. And you
Yeah.
talk about the dinner table, and I've heard it said, man, that's the most sacred, gathering is the
Totally.
gathering around the dinner table where commune and share
Yeah.
your day and laugh and live and encourage.
Right.
And it's become like now it's just not efficient, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll just do our own thing. One of the kids maybe eats in the bedroom and the parents are on the go or whatever it might look
Yeah.
like. And it's like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's time to revisit that.
Yeah. So I'm going to get a little theological on us here. So as I was creating this, app, I did a deep dive study on what Sabbath is, right? And a lot of people might say, Sabbath is rest. Totally, absolutely. God rested on the seventh day. God calls us to rest. And I'm like, there has to be more. I want more. So I did a really deep study of Sabbath, and like I started to see what God, was telling us. And he's like, work 6 days and rest one day. And I'm looking at like, in our American society, and I'm like, wait a second, I have a 2 day weekend. Right? How do I have a 2 day weekend and then I have 5 days, but I'm burnt out? That doesn't make any sense. And then I realized I'm never truly disconnected from work, right? I'm never truly resting because I'm getting all the messages that, you're not, rich enough, you're not this enough, you're not that enough, or whatever it is. You're constantly in that not restful state, right? And so it's interesting, like when God first called his people to Sabbath, there was zero concept of a 2 day weekend or a 1 day weekend, right? And when he called, the Israelites to Sabbath and that resting on one day, it was actually looked down upon by the rest of the world. They're like, oh, look at, these lazy people over here, right? Because, before that, it was slavery, working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, all the time, right? And, one of my favorite verses is that the Sabbath was made for man,
Not
not
man for
man for
this.
the Sabbath. And
Jesus.
what that means is that the Sabbath is actually a gift. It's a gift to us, right? And so it's like, oh, how is it a gift? It's because we're called to rest, but all the study. There's a really good book on Sabbath called Sabbath out there, and he said it's like, yes, we're called to like rest from labor, but we're really supposed to actually invest that time into our community, into our families. And so what got me excited about Sabbath is not only resting, but what else could I be investing my efforts into that's not work, right? Into my that's what that's when you should do daddy daughter or daddy son dates, right? Or that's when you should do family time and family worship and have a great meal with friends and stuff like that, right? So that's what really got me excited about Sabbath is not only resting, but investing into true Sabbath.
Mm. That's beautiful. I remember that verse. In fact, I was just watching an episode of The Chosen, which of course portrays a widened viewpoint of Jesus's journey. And literally, it was the last episode I watched, and he was going through the fields with his disciples, and
Yeah,
uh,
right.
and and that statement is so it resonates, right? That Sabbath.
Yeah.
Man was not made for Sabbath. Sabbath was made for
And
man.
and you can see in his miracles the purpose of Sabbath, right? He's like the Pharisees, like, don't heal the man on the Sabbath, right? And then he's like, you don't get what I'm here to do. I'm here to bring life, right? I'm here to bring restoration, right? It's not about not doing stuff, right? Because that's what the Pharisees were all. It's about doing like what God's mission, right? And so that's what I'm excited for to hear about from the users of Sabbath Space is not only am I off my phone, but like that time I invested in my marriage, I invested in my kids, I invested in my community, right? In the restoration that, God's bringing.
I love it. I love the connection of Sabbath with restoration because truly that's what Jesus was doing on the Sabbath when he got received so much opposition. It's like, hey, wouldn't you save a person on the Sabbath
Yeah.
or your
Hello.
ox, right? You're going to save an ox, but you're not going to save a person, right? You're not going to restore a human being.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my goodness, it is about restoration. It is
Mm-hmm.
about the relationship and the unity. And first unity with our God, which is the source of our restoration. And then it feeds into our family, our community, and of course, and then eventually into our business. We I think we've got it the opposite, right? And
Yeah.
so we put business first and we do it, I think, in a lot of ways because we know where to make a provision. Uh, I think that we need to check that though.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we need to check it because most of us are, once we get to a certain place and we've got
Mhm.
achievement, we've made a provision, and
Yeah.
now it just turns into an addiction.
That's right. Here's actually my hot take on Sabbath. It's kind of funny. I actually work more now that I take a true Sabbath. It's funny because it's actually giving me permission to work 6 days a week instead of five
Mm.
because I'm actually disconnecting on that seventh day. Right. I'm not like half working, checking my emails. I'm not like thinking about work. I'm like totally disconnected. Right. And so, and I'm
So let's
actually, who would have thought following God's, word
yeah,
is actually good.
totally disconnected. Tell me what that looks like. Like
Yeah. So like
no tech.
no tech, no phone, no TV, nature as much as possible.
God's
Right.
creation, yeah.
I have a Tesla, so that has a screen in it, and I'm like, nah,
Sure. Can't
that's
get
okay.
away
That's
from
okay.
driving, right?
Yeah, yeah. Can't get away from driving, but like that's when we're going like on family walks on the beach in the morning, like cooking, and just doing what we want to do that's not in front of a screen. So it's been really rejuvenating.
Oh my goodness. As you're saying it, Eric, my spirit is like relaxing just thinking
Yeah.
about as the experience of that is. And so many of us are in this routine, right?
Yeah.
This routine of like, okay, so I got my, and it's just, and then there's,
Default.
I think we all have different defaults, right? Different
Yeah.
things that are okay. I got some downtime. I'm gonna scroll this. I'm gonna scroll that,
Right.
and sometimes we can, it's like, oh, it's helpful stuff, like, whether
Sure.
it's something to edify or to be edified and things like that.
Right.
However, as you said, this is a sacred space.
Mm.
So let's make it sacred. Let's make it a holy space. And
Yeah.
and I love the way at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, "Be perfect as your Father is perfect." And it's like, man, that's what is that? Whoa,
Yeah.
that's a tall order, right? But if you look at the
Yeah.
original Greek, and you've been to seminary, so teleos is the word for perfect, which means complete. It means whole. It means mature. And
Right.
there's a certain meter of the mature, complete person that creates the boundaries and the borders necessary to be whole in their lives. Because what
Right.
we've got now is we've got this lopsidedness to where
Yes.
we're super heavy on the tech side, and
Right.
we're not complete. And honestly, in some ways, it's a bit immature.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we didn't necessarily even ask for it, right? Like another example that is kind of culturally relevant today is just like how our food is in our society, right? Like try to go keto for a week and you'll realize how much sugar is in every single thing.
I
Right?
know.
All the chemicals in the food, all of this stuff that keeps us unhealthy. No one, everyone tries to, their best to make the good and right choices, but our society and our infrastructure is pulling us in the wrong direction, right? And so the way I describe what Sabbath Space does is it it's it takes just don't keep the cookies in the house,
Right,
right? And
right.
so that I'm not, if it's there, I'm going to eat it. Right? I'm just gonna eat it. It's addictive and I want it. But I'm probably not gonna drive to the store and pick up cookies just because I want cookies. I'm probably just gonna grab the apple that's easily accessible to me and then have that, right? So that's kind of the idea.
No, I love that. And I love, here's the other thing. You can also prepare for the day of Sabbath where you're like, well, I still need my tech for X, Y, and Z. Well, can we get that out maybe the day before? I'm thinking about, for example, we're building our platform for our leadership development model, a great summit for entrepreneurs and business people that's faith infused. Now we have a daily dose of devotional that we're getting ready to launch,
Yeah.
and it's e-based, it's electronic based
Yeah.
download and so on. And you're ministering to me because, for example, say, Saturday or Sunday, whatever the day is, we need to be able to push that out early. Push it out
Sure.
early, a day early, so that you'll have that devotional available
Yeah.
to you, so you don't have to go to the tech. Because I think that's the other part is, as leaders in the space of technology and technology distribution, especially those of us who care about the faith component and being whole,
Mhm.
we have to take responsibility.
Right.
We have to
Yeah.
take responsibility. Just like, in the real world, great examples like a Chick-fil-A or a Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
So, like, what do they say? Look, on the Sabbath, they consider the Sabbath on Sunday. We're not going to serve. We're not going to work. We're not going to
That's
do
right.
any of that. And it's a taking responsibility
Yeah.
as leaders, for those who are called to walk alongside of us. It hits on so many levels.
Yeah.
First, we have to take it in our own lives, in our own homes.
Mhm.
And for someone listening, maybe this is like way out there, because someone listening right now is like, well, I've got three teenagers,
Yeah.
and everybody's doing their thing, and boy, to gather and to say, hey, look,
Mhm.
we're gonna take this day and give it and truly make it sacred and a day of restoration. Um, there's some prayer that has to go into that. There's
Sure.
some communication that has to go into that.
Yeah.
Uh, and we have to take the lead.
One thing that we've kind of built into the app to make it a little bit easier is you have the ability to kind of customize what you want blocked,
Mm.
right? So like for example, I have we call it modes. So I have a devotional mode, I have a church mode, I have a work mode, right? And then I have like a sleep mode. And like my devotional mode, everything's blocked except my Bible app,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Because I'm not going to walk again. I'm not going to walk across the house just to scroll on Instagram or whatever it is, right? And then like you know the phone is a tool, right? So people need a call, people need a text. So like on my on Saturdays, I say, okay, just no social. Just no social for that day, right? But I still have, the tools. I make my phone a tool again, right? Instead of all consuming. And so there are different modes so that you can like say, okay, we're just gonna put this one away for a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I love that. I mean, even as I think about it, I have some Jewish friends and clients, and they're like, "Hey, you better call me before 5 o'clock on Friday because
Exactly.
we're not having a conversation. I'm sure there's emergency type of
Sure.
usage. I would suspect. However, that's the level. And
Yeah.
tell me about how seminary influenced this journey.
Yeah, well, because I had to do kind of like study on Sabbath and like different historical takes on Sabbath and different denominational takes on Sabbath, like Saturday, Sunday, what to do, what not to do. It just helped me kind of take introspection of like, you know, my Sunday, like, is just going to church, calling it a Sabbath. Like, I would encourage anybody, or I would encourage you just, hey, how do you do a Sabbath, right? How do you Sabbath, right? And I was asking a friend who was a pastor. I'm like, hey, how do you Sabbath? And he's like, well, right. And I'm like, okay, so we're not really um taking God seriously as that like this gift that he's given to us, right? And if it's truly a gift, then you know we should be excited for these gifts. And it shows us how far off base we are when we're like, oh yeah, God gave us a gift, whatever, right? No, like it's a rejuvenation, right? Like you feel refreshed after you're off your phone. And everybody
Yeah.
knows it, right?
Yeah, and here's the thing about that refreshment is when when we uh, when we empty our cup of that tag, we get to fill it with something else.
Yes.
So that filling where you said, what am I giving up? Well, just like thinking about, okay, well, now you're probably going to think, well, I think we should go on an outing. We should go and do
Right.
life together, go have a picnic, or we
Yeah.
should have a conversation or finish that project together that gives us life and experience
Yeah.
as a community or as a family. Oh,
Hmm.
remember we were always talking about going and serving in this environment, but we were just like life just kept going on and on. Now this gives us an opportunity
Yeah.
to have intentionality about that.
And for me, one of the things that really gives me life is just cooking for my family.
Mm.
Right. And so I like on Sundays to make and Saturdays, special meals, whether it's just like a nice brunch for my family. And when I'm not on my phone, I actually create the space to think about, how am I going to bless, them with a delicious meal? Like, what do I want to
Mhm.
cook? How do I want to love them in this specific way? And that's the space that Sabbath Space kind of provides you because you need the space, right? Or those new ideas aren't going to happen.
Yeah, man. So, and you went to seminary to be a pastor? Is that what your original intention was?
No, no. Well, right out of college, yeah, like I thought I was going to go into ministry full time, and but when you get married, you gotta work. So, that's what started my career in tech. But my wife is a worship leader, and we've been doing kind of young adults ministry for like 10 years now. So, God said yes to both, basically.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about ministry, the way I understand it, ministry is not a destination, it's an orientation.
Right.
Not a place to go, it's a person to be. We're all
Yeah.
ministers wherever we
Yeah.
are, and this is the unique journey that God's had you on with the exposure to tech, exposure to
Exactly.
the church, the need, especially with, as you mentioned, with the young adults
Yeah.
and some of the challenges they face with isolation and with the with
Mhm.
tech. It's not just them, of course.
It's
It's an
everybody. Yeah.
epidemic across the globe, and your place to foster that return to that relationship, to that unity is it's a blessing to have you and to have your the opportunities you bring to people, and so easy to download on the App
Yeah.
Store or
Yeah.
Google Play, just Sabbath Space.
Yeah. Just on the App Store, you just search Sabbath Space and you'll see it pop up, or you can go to the website, sabbathspace.io. And so when you sign up, actually, we ship you the keychain to tag. And so you get like, a piece of mail from us with the keychain in it and a little letter from our family and how it's affected us and some ideas on how you can invest in your Sabbath.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And what about those cool boards? Where do we get those? On the website too, that you can check at the
Yeah, yeah,
door at the
yeah. So you can get the keychain by itself, or you can get both a package of the keychain or the stand right here that I like for my desk. Yeah, it's super easy. Just sign up and we mail it to you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what if I were to ask you this journey as it's taking you on, what are some of the things that you're finding out about your own journey and your walk as you're pursuing this ministry?
What I'm finding is that we all know the right things to do, right? We know intellectually, we know the facts, we know the statistics, we know all this kind of stuff, but putting it in practice is another animal. It's harder, right? The everyday life of, your phone addiction, like we need tools to help us to kind of get us out of this state into what God has for us. And so it's okay. Just like it's okay to say, hey, I need help with this. Because it's crept into my life further than I want it to have. And that's why we need, brothers and sisters to do this alongside. So one feature that I'm super excited for that we're going to be rolling out in about a month or two is that we're going to be able to Sabbath with friends, meaning that let's say we're friends on the app, we can see, oh, you spent 12 hours in Sabbath this week, right? And like kind of joining alongside of others to do this together, right? Because imagine you're with your friends with, 3 or 5 people and four people are on their phone and you're not. That's hard. That's hard to do, right? But if you collectively say, no, we're all putting our phones to the side and we're going to talk, right?
Yes.
We're going to have dinner, right? Then it becomes easier, different, and a collective thing that you can do with your community.
Oh, 100%. And if you're listening and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't even know where to start, I think exactly what Eric just said is have real conversations and say, hey, you know what? I've let this take too much of my life, too much of the value that I have in and of those relationships, and it's going to stop. I'm making a conscious effort now to invest my time in restoration with those whom I care for. And I want you to join me.
That's good.
Ask your spouse, ask your husband, your wife, ask your kids to
Yeah.
join you on a journey of restoration.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want that?
Yeah. I mean, I guarantee you, if you ask your wife or you ask your kids or ask anybody that you want further relationship, hey, like, can we just have dinner? Put our phones to the side.
Yeah,
Like, who's gonna say no to that, right?
yeah, yeah. I want, yeah, and the other part is that I love how you brought in the almost like the memory of ways that you enjoy pouring into people. For example, for you, it's providing a meal, making something. Same as me. I'm a bit of a foodie. I love to find a meal and make it good. And of course, as you're probably the same way. You're like just waiting to see if somebody is like, "Ooh, that was
Yeah.
good," or if they're going back up for seconds, because it brings you joy
Yeah.
to nourish. And we uncover these almost forgotten joys of our lives
Yeah.
through the realignment, if you will, and the
Yeah.
protection of this most precious gift, as you had rightly said, which is called the present. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why I believe it's called the present, is because, in fact, it is a gift.
The way I say it is let's disconnect so that we can reconnect, with God and others. So
Yeah, yeah. So, hey, Eric, I get to ask this question every so often when there's time and on the show, and I'd love to ask it of you. One day, you will be at the end of this side of the journey to heaven, the great summit, if you will, and you'll get to see all of the people who you got to bless, whether it be through the app, through your ministry, through your business, through all the things that you've encountered. Um, if there's one thing you'd like others to have said about you, what would it be?
I would like, that's a great question. I would like people to say that, he took risks for the Lord.
Mm, mm. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Just like God called Abraham out into an adventure. I think he has a calling like that for everybody. And, he took the step forward and look what he did. Right. And I think there's a similar call for all of us.
Amen. Well, you, my friend, are on your way. Eric, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It was super fun.